Oh, well, welcome to the THC show with Neil. THC stands for Truth, Hope, and Change, and we're going to hope to cover all the different latest news and stuff to do in the cannabis world, and do it in a way that gives you some hope and maybe provides some opportunity for change. I'm Neil Magnuson. I'm an activist operating out of Vancouver for the last 20 years or so. I'm just really an ordinary guy that went a little bit crazy one day. I was always a little bit crazy about the world that we lived in, the corruption that happens. I was brought up with a bit of an ideal about freedom and what democracy meant and public servants and that kind of stuff. And I spent most of my life being disappointed and upset about the state of affairs with respect to how we are respected as individuals.
Hello there, first-time viewers.
And the way
Welcome
that
to
our governments are corrupted by corporate forces and seem to serve and protect their interests instead of ours. I was a cannabis user from an early age. In fact, I was a cigarette smoker at 10 years of age and a drinker from 15 years of age, and got all that out of my system by the time I was about 19, except for cannabis, which followed through with me till now as something that's very valuable to me. And I was always concerned and upset about being called a criminal for using it. That never sat very well with me. And it was about, well, 1999, I guess. My son was 16 at the time. He came to me and said, "Dad, I want to smoke weed with you." And I thought that would be a great thing, except while we were doing that, it occurred to me that my son was also going to be a criminal. And I didn't want that for him. And that was concerning me a lot. And very synchronistically, I saw a poster advertising for a protest against the pot laws that was happening at the art gallery on April 20th. And so we went to that. And we went to the subsequent ones after that every year for 5 or 6 years. We were the main volunteers for 420 and Cannabis Day and the Global Marijuana March. Still didn't really have a really good understanding of why cannabis was illegal and what it was valuable for. And 5 years into being a volunteer there, I was asked to do a renovation for David Malmo Levine, and that involved what we called the Herb School. And that long weekend renovation changed my life. I read The Emperor Wears No Clothes by Jack Herer. I came to understand many of the different values of cannabis industrially and medicinally and spiritually. And it was on the third night of renovations there. We never left, we never slept, we ordered food in. It was a very powerful thing we were doing, and we were very motivated. We did take safety meetings on a regular basis, and every safety meeting I'd read a little bit more of The Emperor Wears No Clothes and get a little more pissed off about cannabis prohibition. It's so useful for so many things. It's so harmless in that it can't kill you. You can't overdose like you can overdose on just about everything else from in the drugstore, in the grocery store, and in nature. And on that third day, I turned the page and started reading about the nutritional value of cannabis. And I thought, oh my God, don't tell me you can eat this too. 3 weeks prior to that, I'd gone to a thing that Greenpeace put on in Ambleside Park, and they had tables set up, and I was talking to some of the ladies there about world starvation and children dying of starvation around the world. And I was having a real hard time with that. And now I turn the page in this book telling me that this amazing plant that grows freely without much fertilizer or pesticide and grows tall and heavily laden in seeds, and those seeds are food, and we could be feeding starving people. And I just rolled that around in my head and connected those dots, and I thought, these evil, greedy corporate bastards are willing to starve babies to death to protect their interests from this valuable plant. And I had an epiphany in my life, and I cried my eyes out, and I called my boss at about 4:20 in the morning, and I said, "Fred, I'm really sorry, but I'm not coming to work." I was a heritage carpenter in charge of a crew on a big job site. And I said, "Fred, I'm really sorry, but I can't come to work, and I'm never coming to work again. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but I got to do something to try to solve this." So Fred told me that he used to be a hippie back in the day, and I never saw that coming. He was a little old bald-headed guy. And he said no hard feelings, and he wished me the best. And that was that for that. And I went to bed at night every night asking the universe to help guide me as to what to do to help to solve this. And that resulted in working at the Herb School and operating it for 22 and a half months before a vision sent me on the road to do the Freedom Tour. I inline skated over 1,000 miles on Canadian highways 3 years in a row to visit communities on behalf of LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, to talk with mayors and police and media and other activists and growers and med users, all in an effort to get to Ottawa for Remembrance Day to talk to the Prime Minister about what freedom is supposed to be, what the role of government is supposed to be in a free country, what happens when you try and prohibit substances in a free country or any country, and the value of cannabis for all that it can be used for industrially and recreationally and medicinally and all these things. I did the Freedom Tour 3 years in a row. I met Stephen Harper 3 years in a row. He got my handout the third year with all of that information. And I felt symbolically, at least, he'd been told. He had that information in his hand, so he knew, and he knew that we knew that he knew. So I thought, well, that's a step. I did the Freedom Tour again in 2012 with my own dedicated vehicle. Went coast to coast. And that time decided, because of the information that I had with the 2002 Senate report, with the Vienna Declaration, with the letter from the mayors of British Columbia demanding an end to prohibition, with the letters from the 4 previous Attorney Generals of British Columbia demanding an end to prohibition. And I went to every police station I could find in Canada and tried to have file opened to investigate why the federal government, in the face of the Senate report alone, would be continuing to cost taxpayers money to feed and make an organized underground thrive and call cannabis users criminals and deny access to people. And that's what I did. I wasn't terribly successful in that I don't think he was ever arrested for it, and I don't know that anybody ever continued that file. The police got onto me pretty quick. By the time I got to Osoyoos in British Columbia, after going up and down the island and up and down BC, they told me, every police station after that it wasn't in their jurisdiction to investigate the federal government. I explained that it's everybody's jurisdiction to stop harm if you know that it's happening, and pleaded with them to continue to look into that and do something about it. In any case, that's who I am. Through the Herb School, I became one of the main organizers of 420 and Cannabis Day and the Global Marijuana March. I've been privileged to have been the MC of many cannabis cups over the years, and I've been a part of the cannabis culture through this place here where this studio is, and I want to thank them for allowing us to have this show at Cannabis Culture here and in the Pot TV studios. There's a lot of good work that's come out of here and a lot of activism that's come out of here, and I'm proud that I've been able to be part of that and maybe help change things a bit. So our show is going to cover the latest news. We're going to talk about the advancements in trying to get medical cannabis access. We're going to have a guest every week. And we're going to do our best to educate, stimulate, and motivate you into understanding the truth, into having some hope, and to be given some ways to change things. I'm going to have a rant every time as well. I'm going to try not to make it too much of an angry rant, although I must say that when I got really upset about starving babies to death, I don't think I've ever been less angry than that any day of my life since. This horrible prohibition of cannabis and the disrespect that we get as individual human adults drives me. It causes me to do what I do every day, to have the goals that I have, but I don't believe in living in anger, and I don't think that anger is a very good way to further causes when you're dealing with human beings. So I try to just leave that as a surface or a below the surface driver of what I do, and I try to have as much fun as I can changing the world and getting the people of influence to understand compassion, to try to use human ethics instead of business ethics in their dealings with being public servants and those other places of influence. We deserve to have freedom. Freedom is a natural right. Freedom, by definition, even in the Canadian courts, simply is the right to do or not do whatever you want to do or don't want to do, unless you're harming other people. It is nobody's business what you do as a human being unless you're harming someone else. That's a natural right. There are people that might care about you, and that's fine. Your parents and family and guardians, maybe your local community, maybe your governments, but I wouldn't count on that. But caring about you doesn't mean forcing you into doing things and deciding for you what is best. And we're in this world because we're in this problem in this world because that's what our governments think they should be doing for us. And their motivations aren't even good. They really don't even care about you or any individuals other than their own family and friends. What they really care about is power to do what they're doing, and security, which they get by servicing the needs of the corporate elite, the financial elite of this country, who've got their fingerprints all over our politicians. Unfortunately, the corruption runs deep here in Canada and every country. They give a lot of lip service to freedom and public servants and what democracy means. But it seems it's just lip service, because in reality, they continue to provide legislation that doesn't protect us, but protects the corporate elite. The worst of these is the attempt to prohibit cannabis. It's my lead issue. I'm a rights activist. My goal is to get individual sovereignty respected by public servants in free democracies. That's what I'm really after. I think the linchpin to getting there is by ending the prohibition of cannabis. Because the prohibition of cannabis is the most obvious and glaring example of how we are not free. Cannabis is one of the most beneficial and benign substances found in nature. It was Judge Francis Young in 1989, a DEA judge in the United States, that declared that cannabis is one of the safest medically or therapeutically active compounds found in nature. Yet here we are with a prohibition using the criminal law to keep people from accessing it. The prohibition of cannabis is not founded in any desire by your public servants to protect you from a dangerous substance. It's founded in corporate greed and the desire to control minorities. It's been a horrible blight on human society in North America and around the world. In places around the world, they execute people for having little more than an ounce of cannabis. It's too disgusting to really talk about. Here in Canada, thanks to activism and the freedom that our forefathers have fought for, that we get some value from, we've been able to speak to the power about this cause. And we've done very well at that so far. We've progressed a long way. I know that we don't have the legalization that we hoped for. In fact, this is horrible, and maybe it's even Prohibition 2.0. But I do believe it's a step in the right direction. I do believe we're moving that way, and that they're not going to get away with Prohibition 2.0. That it's a temporary step, again, in this path that we're following to try to get rights for cannabis users that will then extend to everybody else. The fight for freedom has been bloody and long, and it seems to be far from over, except for we're at a very crucial stage in our life. The technologies that are in place that allow me to communicate with you also allow them to watch what we're saying and doing. If we don't establish proper foundations of freedom and what democracy means and what the role of public servants is supposed to be and where their limits are, if we don't make them accountable for their actions of corruption because they're allowed to make legislation that protects them, if we don't find a way to make them transparent in what they're doing, they will keep having meetings behind closed doors with corporate lobbyists armed to the teeth with whatever it takes to bribe or threaten a politician. We need to stop this fast. We need to get them to understand that we are the power, that people are the power. The power is in the masses of people and how we either act or don't act. We need to act for change soon because they're acting for change now. And as we look at the currents of change that are happening around the world, it is quite disturbing. They're manipulating people to be divisive amongst themselves. They're manipulating us to be concerned about things that aren't to do with what we should be concerned about. So we're going to try to help people focus a little bit on what's right and what's wrong and ways to change that. And I guess that's my rant for the day. So take what you will out of that. We're going to do this every week and try to get more and more clear about what freedom is and what the role of government is and what we can do to affect it in ways that protect our children from those greedy, evil bastards that right now seem to have their way with our politicians and our dumb-ocracy.
There you go. You're still alive.
There you go. We're still alive. I'm looking at my My partner in crime here, Mr. Neil, is my co-host on the down low. He's really the producer of our show and every other show at Pot TV. And we're hoping we have some sort of a video. What do we got coming up next now? We're going to do the Martin Medical Moment. Is Jerry Martin around? And it's almost 4:20. Well, let's do that then. Where is it? We're almost. Oh, we're still 3 minutes away. Let's watch a video from BC Bud Day. Oh, we got news to do, so we're going to come back with news before we talk to Jerry. So I'm just getting started here, folks. You have to bear with me. And they called the police. The Parks Board's called the police, and the police came down, and the people here explained, our civil rights, what kind of civil actions we're taking, why we're doing that, and the police decided that they had better things to do. And then
all right. Well, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, man. I appreciate this conversation. Well, Neil. I got a call saying that the park rangers had come in quite aggressively and that they were wanting nothing to be done here and shutting everything down. And of course they got resistance from the people here. That's what we do. And they called the police. The Parks Board's called the police. Get some of those drugs that are in the powdered flap and die, behind a dumpster. Why don't you come here and get some weed, go over there and have a little snooze and feel better and live. And this is what we're trying to do, to save people's lives. These laws that are happening have always been wrong, right? This is a world full of alcohol and tobacco and toxic pharmaceutical substances, processed white sugar shit, killing people. And this stuff is medicine for people. And that's why it's been made illegal, is because it threatens pharmaceutical interests and other industrial complex interests, right? It's never been about protecting people from a dangerous plant. You guys are peace officers, you're public servants. We pay you to protect us and keep us safe. There's nobody being harmed here in any way. We're saving people's lives and we're helping.
No, I spoke with the gentleman earlier. I said I'd be by to check before you guys, make sure you guys are okay. And that was the agreement. I said I'd come by, that's what I'm doing, and that's what I'm doing.
That's cool. So I thought you were trying to prevent cannabis sales, because that'd be a horrible thing to do. People need to have access to cannabis, right? The only people you're protecting by stopping cannabis sales are gangs and corporate greedy bastards that are running these government stores. You don't want to protect those people, man. Protect us, right? That's right, but that's bullshit. That's bullshit.
How do we get that license?
Where is that license?
How do we get it?
Who would get that?
Sign up? I'll take one.
License? Please show me.
And said, yeah, no, we're going to keep selling weed, and that's what we do. And don't tell us to not do that, because people need to have weed available for sale. We're not all rich. We can't just give it away. But people need to have access to cannabis to get off of opioids. And our whole thing is about, don't go there and buy that flap of powder and die. Come here and buy some cannabis and go have a little nap somewhere and feel good and live. Have a good night. Yeah, easy access to medical cannabis saves lives, that's for sure. And look at that, it's exactly 4:20. I want to mark the 4:20 moment. For those of you who don't know, 4:20 is that time of day and night. Actually, it's just the time of day mostly, but for some people it's the time of night where we mark cannabis by smoking it, or by ingesting it. We consume cannabis at 4:20 because it's a tradition, and traditions are kind of good and they're kind of cool. I think it helps a lot of people with a lot of things having a tradition like this. 4:20 started apparently, at least as a tradition, in California, where probably back in the 90s, maybe earlier than that.
Is he guessing?
I'm just guessing. I'm not sure when those university students at Berkeley that they get credit for this were talking to each other about consuming cannabis after classes. And 4:20.
Grateful Dead fans.
Grateful Dead fans?
Within that era. Let's not make up the dates.
I'm not making up no dates.
Enjoy 4:20. Get to the real news and not make up the.
Well, I gotta stretch this out until I'm finished smoking this a little bit, right?
Well, you can keep smoking.
So anyway, apparently 4:20 was the code to get together after classes and consume cannabis. Although they probably called it smoking marijuana. At the same time, apparently, it was also the code that was being used by the LA Police Department to arrest people. No, that's not true? Okay, we'll debunk that right here. See what happens when you go live and start saying what you think you know? So that's not true?
No, definitely not.
And Neil, who doesn't have a camera on him but should, I asked for one.
I don't need a camera. I've got the truth.
It's coming in. He's here to keep me honest and telling the truth. So we'll just give it to the Berkeley students then, that 420 kind of became the thing to do. People that were consuming cannabis as part of the, the culture with their friends, kind of recognized over time that 420 was a special moment. In 1995, a couple of employees of Mark Emery's downstairs, because we're at Mark Emery's store that's been here for a long, long time on Hastings Street in Vancouver, they wanted to mark the day all day long at the park across the street by protesting the laws and consuming cannabis on April 20th. Apparently Mark didn't think that was a great idea, but he went along with it anyway, and it happened. And that was the start of the 420 festival protest that's been going on here and now all around the world in many different parts ever since. This past year in Vancouver, always unpermitted, although the city has a funny way of kind of permitting things. But, we certainly forced the issue early on. We preached hug power about hugging people that would be arrested at our 420 protestivals, and not letting go, but not touching the cops, and not letting them get away with it, basically, by screaming at them that there was no victim and no need for peace officers, and making sure that we videotaped it all. And we told the cops early at our 420 rallies through the megaphones that that's what our plan was, and that's what we were going to do. And that kept them away. And the other thing that we kept doing was giving away weed. At 420, everybody got high, and we made sure of it. It got to the point where we're gathering up weed from private growers and dispensaries. It started with Kush.ca, I must say. Kush was the ones that really stepped up and helped us have pounds of weed for people. Dispensaries took over after a while, and they made sure that we had pounds of good quality weed for people. This past 420, we had somewhere between 10 and 14 pounds of weed that we brought in and rolled up, and we just give it away to the crowd. The crowd this past year in Vancouver was over 100,000 people at the 420 moment at 420 at Sunset Beach. An incredible crowd of people. We can't give them all weed, of course. We can only get out to the people that are about 100 feet from the stage, and that's about it. But we do that, and so our event has become very huge and very popular all around the world, and it's all about 420. So there we go. I marked the 420 moment. We're going to go to news. There are some things happening in the world. We're going to try to keep you up to date with those. It's not all good news. Most of it's not good news, but some of it is. There's continuing raids going on across Canada, here in BC by the Community Safety Unit, or is that the criminal psychopath unit or sycophant unit? These people need to be disgusted with themselves. If you work for the CSU, quit. Stop doing what you're doing. How could you possibly do that? Would you knowingly go to work for Hitler in the death camps? Do you not have any conscience whatsoever? Cannabis dispensaries have been providing access to medical cannabis people for about 20 years here, starting in Vancouver and now in many communities across Canada. They are not recreational dispensaries, except that recreation is a subset of medicine and is preventative medicine and is also part of what you should be doing for your own personal health. But they are not the government stores. The government stores, by their own definition, are non-medical. They don't have proper low barrier cannabis for people in poverty and that have issues like that. They're not designed to look after poor, sick people. We need dispensaries. It was determined in the Allard case. Judge Phelan declared that cannabis dispensaries were at the heart of access. That's a Supreme Court judge making that comment. So for governments to think it's okay to go around and forcefully shut these places down, put these people out of work, deny access to people that need it, no, you don't have the right to do that. You should not be doing that. You would not survive in court with what you're doing. We're going to beat you there again, and they should stop doing that. I'm just beside myself angry about it. They've been busting and closing down places and using intimidation, and it's just not right. Freddie Pritchard keeps track of how many raids there are. I'm not sure what the number is now, so I'm not going to say it, but you can check him out on the One Man Smoke Show. Free plug, Freddie. And he's been on this since the beginning, understanding that the Liberal plan of legalization meant that they get to sell it to you and they get to produce it, and the regulations prevent anybody else from really getting involved in that unless you're rich and an insider, and that they were going to forcefully close down all these places and do that, and that's exactly what's been happening. There are some still open. I recommend that if you're a dispensary and you are still open in this world right now, you be as medical as you can. That is what you're doing. You are there to provide access to medical patients. You need high-dose edibles, you need topicals, you need suppositories, you need cannabis for people that face barriers of poverty and other things like that. There should be really good quality craft cannabis for good prices, not $14 a gram, not $12 a gram. So those dispensary raids are still happening. We're hopeful that they're going to stop where they are and not do any more. We don't know. Here in Vancouver, there's about a dozen dispensaries that are still offering medical cannabis and high-dose edibles and what I just described. And so far, they're being left alone. Touch wood on that. And hopefully we can win this war for medical dispensing. And there's going to be a lot about that on our show. We're going to have a talk with Jerry Martin about his constitutional challenge. We're going to talk a bit about John Conroy and his constitutional challenge. We're going to see how we're pushing the envelope with the Cannabis Substitution Project and other projects that are sprouting up that are doing similar things there. And we're going to be following this story very, very close. That is really, we're very interested on this show about what happens with people's access to medical cannabis. You couldn't be more oppressed if you're a sick and suffering person and some government comes along and tells you that you can't get that healing herb that's going to help you. I mean, who does that? Who are these people? And we're not going to stand for that. We're going to expose them every chance we get as best we can. In Quebec, they've decided that they're in charge of people there, and their serfs won't be able to have any brownies or gummies or creams or liquids, and they're going to cap any edibles that are for sale at 5%, half of what the government is going to have in their recreational stores. Just outrageous. I mean, just hand everybody over to the black market. And I know that there's so much corruption in Quebec in Canada, and I'm sure that's what's going on there, isn't it, Quebec? That the bikers and the other gangsters there, they don't like you selling weed that they can give to people, right? That's what's going on. You're supporting the underground black market with the gangsters and that kind of stuff, because that's what Prohibition protects. That's who you're protecting with our tax dollars. So you're on call, Quebec. We're watching you, and you better get in line because we're coming after you with litigation and public opinion. It's just not right what you're doing. You're worse than Trudeau and his Cannabis Act, and it's up to the provinces to try to be a little bit better than that. 21-year limit, age limit in Quebec as well. Give everyone else over to the black market. Meanwhile, back in BC, there's been no arrests for cannabis-impaired driving since legalization, and I give kudos to the police on that. Not that there can't be impairment for driving with cannabis. I know cannabis can impair some people, especially novice users are somewhat debilitated by having their senses enhanced, and that's a little hard to control, and that happens a few times after you've used cannabis. You realize that music sounds better and colors are a little brighter and noises are a little louder, and you get used to that, and then it's okay. And many veteran drivers are not impaired by cannabis at all. And in fact, the medical users for cannabis that are using it to deal with pain, all the value and power of the cannabis is used in dealing with the pain. They're not high school stoned on anything. They maybe wish they were, but they're not stupid, they're not stoned, they're not delayed anything. They're just dealing with pain, which by itself is debilitating and would impair people. And so we're going to need to get all that straightened out with the whole driving on cannabis. So good on the police in BC for recognizing that just because somebody's consumed cannabis doesn't make them impaired. And if they don't qualify by a series of simple and easy to do tests to gauge whether someone is impaired, that they don't get a ticket. And so far in BC, nobody's got a ticket. So good for the police and good for the people of BC not driving impaired on cannabis. It's up to you. Don't drive impaired. That's a horrible thing to do. You're driving a 2,000-pound weapon around, and if you're not able to stop when you should, well, you can just imagine what could happen. So nobody drive impaired. But authorities get it right. Most people on cannabis are not impaired, and we need to have police that understand that and ways to determining that, and stop scaring medical patients that need cannabis and can't be without it into not driving, which is happening across Canada. They're afraid to get in their cars and drive. They're afraid they're going to lose their vehicles. Even though they know they're not going to be impaired, they don't trust the authorities to not understand that they're not impaired. So we've got a lot of work to do to get that right as well. I just want to go back for a minute and talk a bit about the edibles that are going to be available in these dispensaries in Quebec, capping it at 5 milligrams. 5 milligrams is not right. That's not even enough for a person to find out if it does anything for them at all. So they're going to have to buy 2 or 4 even to get anything out of it. 10 milligrams of edibles or of cannabis in edibles is the right dose for people that have never tried it before. That's where you should pretty much start, is at 10 milligrams. Wait for 45 minutes for an hour, see how you feel. Start low, go slow. That's the thing with cannabis edibles. It won't kill you, but you can be very uncomfortable. You won't like it. It's kind of self-teaching in that way. When you eat too much, you usually won't eat too much soon after that or ever again. But you will continue to want to use cannabis because it's very helpful, and especially at the right dosage. All right, to our other news story here, which is about Vancouver, getting more local as we go. In Vancouver, the former mayor and council, Robertson and his council, put in an exclusion zone into the downtown East Side Hastings corridor where no cannabis dispensing would be allowed. And that was on the recommendations of Coastal Health, especially the Dr. Daly, who apparently has some sort of a personal vendetta against cannabis that doesn't even actually reflect all of how Coastal Health feels about cannabis. But on her recommendations, that council put in an exclusion zone, no cannabis to be dispensed. Thanks to the efforts of the Cannabis Substitution Project, which we're going to talk quite a bit more about a little later on in the show, and the High Hopes Foundation, run by Sarah Blythe, who runs the Overdose Prevention Society and has high-dose edibles available for people. Both of these projects have been running for, well, hers close to 2.5 years, ours just barely 2.5 years. And because of those efforts, there's been a lot of cannabis put into that area, and there's a lot of anecdotal evidence and people talking about how it's helping them. And there was enough of a groundswell that Rebecca Bly, with the new council under Mayor Kennedy Stewart, put forward a motion to allow cannabis to be dispensed in that vulnerable area of the Hastings corridor, specifically to address the opioid crisis. So that's an important distinction there, because the government stores are recreational, non-medical, would not have what is required to address the opioid crisis. And so she put forward a motion to allow for a different model of dispensing cannabis in different forms than what is being offered through the Cannabis Act, which is very wonderful and very powerful. Despite Dr. Daly being there and once again highly recommending that they not do that, Council listened to us, the activists, and what we had to say, and they passed that motion 7-2. There were 2 councillors not there that day. The motion was also amended to include discussions about how to dispense cannabis with VANDU, the Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users on the downtown east side, and with a group called People Who Use Drugs, which is a group that exists, but it's also a vague statement and wasn't necessarily referring to the group. It was referring to the fact that the people on the downtown east side through VANDU have a saying that is nothing about us without us. And so it's very powerful that these groups have been included in discussions as to how to dispense cannabis on the downtown east side, because the only groups that were to be discussed in the original motion were the Vancouver Police Department, Coastal Health, and the British Columbia Liquor Cannabis Distribution Branch. So in the meantime, we are still dispensing cannabis on the downtown east side and have been for 2.5 years. We'll do a whole segment on what the Cannabis Substitution Project is doing, but we are already providing a model of what has to happen down there, and that needs to include high-dose edibles, low-cost, good-quality cannabis flowers and concentrates, and topicals and other things. So we're looking forward to having those discussions with the city and where that will lead. Which leads me to my last news item today, which is BC Bud Day, which happened in Vancouver yesterday. Feel free, I think, to have a BC Bud Day wherever you are as well. But here on this weekend in Vancouver 4 years ago, it got another jump start. There was an original attempt to get it going a few years before that. But thanks to Darren and Katie's resilience and persistence, We've continued to have what is now BC Bud Day. It's held at the same park in Vancouver that we've had Cannabis Day for the last 4 years, Thornton Park. And it was a wonderful gathering of the community there yesterday as well. But it's in the news because the Parks Board, which always seems to think they're doing Vancouverites a favor by not allowing 420 and events to happen in their parks, showed up and were quite nasty and angry and instructing that we were not to be there, we were not to set up any tents, we were not to sell any cannabis, and that led to them calling the police. So sometime shortly after 9 o'clock, the police arrived. There was discussions with the activists who I'm very proud to say did a great job. Dylan, Carly Thiessen, Dylan McCardle, and a few others spoke truth to power, explained what we were doing there, explained the liability that might happen to citizen police officers, people who are police officers and park rangers who have those jobs can also be held civilly responsible for their action if they damage your property or impede you in certain ways. And in the case of not having tents, the Geneva Convention says that we're allowed to have protection from the elements when we're protesting, and it was a very hot day yesterday. So they stood them down. Someone yelled media at one point, and they all just walked away. The police came back later in the day. The police did leave saying, you guys are good to have your event, but we don't think you should be selling any cannabis. I know that they were told that there would be cannabis given away and that there might be donations taken, and they just kind of shrugged and walked away. They did come back a little later in the afternoon, and you saw the clip of me talking to police officers there. They tried to say no sales of cannabis, and I told them right away, well, that would be horrible. Stop doing that. The reason that we have cannabis here for sale is we're not rich, and we need to have cannabis available, and we've got a license, a verbal license from the City of Vancouver in their latest motion to allow the dispensing of cannabis to address the opioid crisis, and that's exactly what we were doing there. That's exactly what all of our events do all the time. Having access to high-dose edibles helps people get off of their drugs and off of the street drugs and off the opiates. We're saving lives with cannabis. And to be interfered with by governments and public servants when we're trying to help people is really obscene. I mean, who are they trying to protect by not having cannabis sales in a park? Who are they trying to protect? The cannabis isn't going to hurt anybody. It's there to help people. The people selling the cannabis, they're good people. They know what they're doing. They're going to educate anybody that comes along. They're going to make sure they don't sell to minors, and that anybody that is a novice is properly educated, and all the rest of it. That we've been self-regulating these markets and self-regulating the distribution of cannabis here in Vancouver for over 20 years. And we don't need them. In fact, they are harmful. They are killing people. They need to back off and stop interfering with our community and the people that know and understand that cannabis helps people with opioid addiction and getting off of the street drugs. So that's what happened there. I think we have another clip, do we, Anil?
CTV News.
Very cool. So we have another clip from CTV News about our BC Bud Day yesterday, and then we're going to come back with the Martin medical moment.
Pot activists throwing a so-called BC Bud Day event in Vancouver's Thornton Park say they were asked to leave the area because they were selling edibles.
And we've been 2.5 years in the downtown east side giving out high-dose cannabis edibles to people to help them get off opioids. We've been so successful that City Council just recently passed a motion to allow for cannabis in that Hastings corridor to offset the opioid crisis, and that means high-dose edibles, not something that the government stores can supply.
Magnuson says Park Board staff called Vancouver police, who responded and let them go over what he calls a civic protest against unfair laws. Cannabis edibles are currently illegal in Canada.
Hi, Jerry.
How you doing, Neil?
Very well, sir. Good to see you.
Take the mic with you.
You're not in jail yet?
No.
Much against your best estimates?
Yeah. I know. I thought it would have been done a long time ago.
You're not good at estimating things, that's for sure.
It's been a battle.
This is a mustache toker from Gibson James, glassblower. He's not a sponsor, you know. I promote who I like and what I like, right? So one day we might have a sponsor. I'm told people are thinking about sponsoring the show. That'd be awesome. And I get my own back. I'll even put a plug in for Dr. Coffee.
That's what you're
Because
supposed to there, actually.
Because I love Dr. Coffee, and
Every two, very supportive.
they're very supportive of the Cannabis Substitution Project, and I've heard nothing but good things about them. So they were talking about they might want to sponsor the show. Well, I want to plug them anyway. That's how I feel about that.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Martin, sir, Jerry Martin from Whitewood, Saskatchewan. At least you lived there. When did you move to Whitewood? I guess let's start there.
When did I get arrested? Was it 2016? Like 2007?
2007. So you moved to Whitewood in 2007. You had some roots there anyway, did you?
Well, my mom had just moved there.
I see. So you kind of followed her a little bit.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't too long, and you decided there was a need in town, and the thing that you could do to give back, because you're a guy who wants to give back. You lived a life that got you to a point where you wanted to give back. That's true?
Sure, yeah. So, you know, probably about 6-7 years went by. I owned a few other businesses, and I was very giving with those businesses as
Right.
well. But I think it was about 6-7 years in, 2012. I closed down my tattoo studio, and I opened up a head shop, and then that transformed into being approached about opening a dispensary.
So you had a dispensary. What was the name of that dispensary?
Martin Medical Services.
Right. And small town?
Yeah,
How many people are in Whitewood?
about 1,000.
And you're like halfway between Regina and Winnipeg or something like that.
Yeah, pretty close. Well, halfway between there and Brandon, I would think. Be more
There you go. 1,000 people in the town.
Yeah, about 1,000. Yeah.
And you had your dispensary for how long?
4 years. I had it for 2 years, but it wasn't really out there. I was everybody knew it was there.
Right.
But it wasn't until 2014 when I took it over myself that the news articles came out. On the front page, I don't know exactly what we were doing. We were forthcoming about everything, and from there it went on.
At the end of it, you had about 1,000 members?
Yeah, and a lot of those were local, or at least people that would drive to the dispensary.
Right.
Represented
a fair percentage of the town.
Well, yeah, for sure, and the surrounding communities, and I had calls from other community developers working for mayors, and wanting us to open one there, and then a week later we were taken out, unfortunately.
Well, right. And you were a medical dispensary. You
Yep.
required proof of illness or confirmation of a diagnosis.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
A doctor on board, and you were trying as best you could to follow the guidelines of what Health Canada would want in a dispensary and that sort of thing.
Health Canada didn't really have,
safe, right?
but the CMCD did at that time, so I joined them to get some knowledge, and whatever I could, I put
and
it.
follow their policies.
Yeah, and I went to doctor symposiums and did their accreditation and things like that as well, because I really wanted to learn about the medical. And
you wanted to do it right.
Well, you're dealing with people's lives. You don't want to fuck with them.
And you're risking your own.
Yeah, and I'm
You're
risking
risking
my
your own.
own. So I want to know.
So you want to do it
If
right.
I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to find somebody that will.
And you were
for
hoping
sure.
that you'd be able to transition into a legal marketplace at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was all the motion to legalize cannabis that happened, and then there was like lots of things that.
I didn't think I'd make it 5 minutes first. I didn't think I was going to make it 5 days.
Right, I know what that's like when I opened the herb school
Yeah.
in Vancouver in 2004, which was the second dispensary. Once the sign went up, we stood back and went, well, we're open. And once again thought maybe by the end of the day we wouldn't be. But, days come and days go. Fire. I have one of these.
Nice. Remo?
There are priorities, right?
Absolutely. This is number one. Gets me
This
out
is
of bed in the
medical
morning.
cannabis for both medical users,
Yeah.
and there's definitely medical benefit. But it also helps me with the smile on my face and keeping my lips moving, which is probably important too.
Mostly for killing
So
people sometimes.
so you're trying to do it right. You're hoping for legitimacy in the end. You know that there's a risk going on to yourself in the meantime, and at some point, Health Canada sends you a letter and tells you to stop.
Yeah, they
When did
sent.
that happen?
2015, they sent out to, I believe, 13 dispensaries across Canada.
Got those
Some of the
letters.
more, I don't know if it was just picked. There seemed to be some recognizable ones on there. They were trying to make a point or whatever. But in the end, they chose 13 of them. I happened to be one.
Right.
Yeah.
And you didn't close down.
No, they threatened me with I think it was 2 years on the letter, plus up to a $5 million fine. And if I didn't comply, they were bringing in, I believe it was called Vanessa's Law, and quite frankly, I never looked it up. I was in enough trouble then. I didn't care.
Did you believe it?
Yeah, I called up my lawyer immediately. I don't know if we want to go down that road.
Oh, no, it's all right.
Yeah.
It's all right. I mean, it's a serious threat.
Yeah, no, I called up my lawyer immediately, and I asked what to do. It was a scary thing.
But you didn't close down.
No.
You could have.
I could
And
have.
walked away.
Yeah.
Lots of people did.
Yeah.
Some people did.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was lots. But I want to speak for a minute about why you don't close down when that happens. You're a bit of a humble guy, and I'm not going to put it on you to tell that, because I want to tell you that. When you're a dispensary operator, you care about your clients. You can't help it. Even if you start going into business just to make money, it doesn't take very long, and pretty soon you care about some of the people that are coming in there. They're crying in front of you. They're thanking you for helping them get access to what's saving their lives and giving them back their lives in many cases. And to quit doing that is almost impossible to do. How could you ever quit doing that? You can't. If you have a compassionate bone in your body, you can't. That's what happened in Vancouver when the city decided to regulate out of business the 150 dispensaries that were here. They took away 7 of the revenue streams. They put in a $30,000 licensing fee. They tried to chase everybody away. Instead, what happened, we had 150 open dispensaries, and we had 176 people apply for licenses.
I was here that day
Everybody
with
wanted
cash.
to stay open. I didn't understand it. I couldn't understand it myself as an advocate for these places. And I started going around to the different dispensaries and asking them, why are you even applying? This is what we should all boycott it, right? The answer was the same at every single one. They're going to do whatever they can do to keep satisfying the needs of their clientele. They couldn't stop doing that. They didn't want to go back to the underground. They didn't want to go back to their homes or wherever it is that they could sell cannabis without a storefront. They wanted to be legitimate. They knew what they were doing was right. And they couldn't stop doing it, even if the government was going to make it near impossible for them to make any money doing it. They all tried. Most of them failed to meet the requirements of
Not even the government, the landlords. They took it way advantage, especially in places like Vancouver, 8-10.
It's been a horrible
double,
ride
triple rents.
of greedy people.
Yeah.
It's been that. So you can't quit. You're going to keep doing. You're going to hope that you're going to be saved in the end. You're going to hope that you've done things the right way, that you haven't hurt anybody, that maybe actus rea and mens rea means something in this world. And so that's why you don't stop doing it, and you can't stop doing it. Because if you close your storefront and tell the government you're going to stop doing it, you're still doing it. Because when Mrs. X comes in to get, calls you and says, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" You're going to hook her up. Out the back door of your place, or meet her in a parking lot somewhere. You're going back to being a drug dealer in a nasty world of prohibition, and that's not good for anybody. And nobody wants to be there. And when you've been a dispensary owner and you've been doing it legitimate, and you're trying to be, you can't believe that the government's actually going to do what they're going to do to you. And so you keep open. So you stayed open, and they raided you.
Yeah. So I stayed open. And I think 2 years, nearly 2 years went by.
Yeah.
And then there was no
more letters.
No more letters, not like the rest of the province. I don't know.
Over your shoulder, you're doing business.
They did not like what I don't know. They compared me to some horrible people.
So it was a big surprise when they raided you.
Well, it wasn't so much the big surprise of the raid as what they did to me.
Right.
And so many local people.
Run me through it. You're open, and all of a sudden, what happens?
Well, I'm open. I went in. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. I'd start opening earlier because it was getting too busy. So anyways, I just went into my usual thing. I had my secretary in the back there. In my office, and I just was in my dispensary. I just opened, and I hear, "Hey, Jerry." So I go out, and it's the police, and I said, "Just a minute," and I went back, because you know what I mean.
Two guys in uniform?
No, Angela. I forget her name. Very small town. We know each other, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, small town. She's under Tinder too. Anyways, I shouldn't. Anyways, some remote mercifulness there. So they said, "Can we talk to you outside?" And I said, "Yeah." no problem. So I go outside, and then they just said, you're under arrest for all this and that.
Handcuffs
and
right
they
away?
took everything.
Handcuffs
man.
right away?
Yeah. And then, and they took everything, all my vehicles, all my, my homes. I got that finally, on season. You bought that actually.
Yeah.
But they took everything, and they made even my change, man. You know what I mean? They left me a little jar of roaches by my door.
They usually leave
But
something
even all
that
my
you can
personal medicine, it was clearly expired cookies and stuff in my freezer, way under my limit. They took all of it, right?
Is that at your home or at the business?
At the home. So not only did they raid my business, they raided me at home, which they haven't done anywhere else there either.
And these are the local RCMP.
The local RCMP, and they're playing the playgrounds I helped build, sitting in the town squares. That it's not just me; it's the community helped build it, because they're the ones that supported that, right? And that includes the local, like the Whiteward Herald. They were all very supportive, right?
And you were supportive of them. So I want to talk a little bit about the reputation that you got as the King of Compassion. That's because you were giving back to your community and the cannabis activist community for a long time. I don't want to make. I'm going to get you blowing your own horn a little bit, Jerry. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the things that you did for Whitewood and
I don't know. I helped rebuild the pool house, kids camps. I offered $10,000 to the fire department.
Wouldn't take it?
No, they wouldn't take it, because by this time there's a story coming out, and the mayor chickened. He didn't know where the money come from. He had no idea what I was doing in there. And you've been to Whitewood. How small this town is. We don't even have street lights, parking meters, nothing. It's too little street. It's like, come on, 4 years you're the mayor, and it says marijuana mail orders, and there's a front page story that says they sell marijuana, but you don't know where the money's coming from. Come on, buddy, just step up. You know what I mean? You could have done some great things for your community. And I got a little hostility there because you chicken shit. You know what I mean? And he made me look tried to make me look like a bad citizen when I was a good citizen.
He's another victim of prohibition. It's what happens. Families
that
turn against each other, communities
unfortunately,
turn against people. You don't want to be on the side of that guy because he's got that stigma attached to him.
That's right. And he's part of the God-fearing church.
We need people to step up. We need everybody to step up. We need celebrities to step up. We need doctors to step up, lawyers, police. We need people to step up and get on the right side of history, get on the right side of this issue. This is a right and wrong issue.
You know what I mean?
And they're wrong on their side.
They're going straight in for the dollar. And that's it. They don't give a shit. I don't see them, giving any money to the communities at all in Saskatchewan. In fact, they just said, no, they're not getting nothing. Even where there's grows and things like that, they're getting nothing. In the end,
corruption runs deep in this
people
country.
like that didn't stand up when they could have. Fortunately, it's not just them; it's the entire community and many other communities that pay the cost because of that.
That's absolutely true. So where are we now? That was 2016.
2016, yeah. Where are we
What
now?
time of year?
November 7th or 8th. Yeah.
Okay. So late 2016. We're now most of the way through 2019.
Yeah.
You're not in jail yet.
Not yet.
They've scared you all previously.
I'm sorry if I'm not so positive. It's been a long fucking 3 years.
Yeah. Probably better out than in, but not necessarily.
They
right?
really drain you, man. They drain you financially, emotionally. They threaten you. It's a long, tough road, man.
And you still think bad things are coming?
Well,
I hope they're not. I'm not optimistic.
I hope they're not, but I don't trust those motherfuckers. Excuse my language. I don't trust them. They're the ones rewriting the laws to make sure they work. You know what I mean? When they don't work, they just rewrite them again. The Supreme Court says you can have this. Yeah, let's rewrite them again.
They gave you back.
We'll make up some more laws.
They gave you back your house so you could sell it to pay lawyers.
Yeah, about 3 years later, 2.5 years later.
You're still going to court when?
And there's something coming up here shortly in August. We got to get all the witness statements in. You got to understand they're not going to let witnesses just say what they want to say or how they feel on the stand. They're not allowed to do that. They're only allowed to refer to a statement that they're going to submit.
I see.
So no, So
and that's a cutoff date coming up in August.
In August, and rest in peace, Tracy Curley. She was working on the affidavits before she passed. So So yeah, so we're out there again, another little.
And
little
that's in preparation for an actual trial that's to come up next spring.
Yeah, it should
Is
be
there
in
a
the
firm
spring.
date on that?
No firm date yet. They're talking February, March.
You've had dates come and go, partly with your own lawyer issues, other things as well. You've waived your Section 11.
Yeah,
a few
11B
times.
there. So
You've
yeah.
had how many appearances, or you don't know?
I don't know. There was an hour 34. I think that one said.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I
The
think,
local news loves it. I sold more newspapers than they ever sold in the history of that newspaper. People were buying them in stacks, she said.
I talked to your prosecutor, Robin Newsom.
So you call him? I got lots of other names for that
He
guy.
refused to answer to me in any way why he would be proceeding with no victims, how he could proceed without any evidence of mens rea, the idea that you thought you were hurting people, or actus reus, where you actually went out and physically harmed somebody. He refused to answer those questions. He asked me if I was a lawyer. I said no, but I have a fairly good lay understanding of the law, and I like to understand the law, and I'd like you to explain it to me. You're a public servant, and I'm the public. He said, "Are you recording this?" I said, "Oh no, sir, I'm not recording it." But, he wouldn't tell me. He hung up on me eventually.
Did he ask if you're recording it? You didn't tell me that. Paranoid. I got him so paranoid, that guy.
Yeah.
Oh, I got under his
skin. The first thing he said
I probably shouldn't have,
when
but I did.
identified myself. I said, I want to inquire as to the Jerry Martin case that's coming up here. I've got some questions about that. And he said, "Do you know Jerry?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a friend of Jerry." He says, "Well, do you know what that guy did to me?" I mean, I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe there's things I don't know about Jerry. I don't know, I think I know him pretty well.
Yeah.
But, no, what did he do to you? I really was, And he said, "Well, he put my phone number out there for people, and I have so many people calling me and telling me I should drop the charges, and I'll guarantee you I won't be dropping those charges." Oh my God!
It's personal.
What a
It's
horrible
personal.
thing you did to him.
He's making it very personal,
Give
right
people
there.
access to this person who's in charge of your fucking life.
Yeah.
Like, what a horrible thing you've
He still
done.
won't answer me if he's got stocks. I keep asking him if he's got stocks, right?
see.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I think you're part of it. Straight up, man.
Oh, man.
Stocks go up, we go out, right?
Well,
I mean,
corruption runs deep.
It
You know
does,
that.
yeah.
And those people do their job with their eyes firmly shut because they're not allowed to think
when the
about ethics
corruption's
or right or
running the
wrong.
place.
They're just paid a large salary to do the job. It costs about $250,000 to buy a judge. I'm not sure how much it costs to buy that guy.
Really? That would have been
but-
cheaper.
Yeah, maybe but they got exclusive once they sign with the government. It's more than just the $250 that they get. It's that you better go along with us or else, right?
Yeah.
We don't know how. I mean, the corruption is not as obvious as maybe in some other countries here, but we do look at the results, and it's not coincidence. I'm not a coincidence theorist. I look at what happens, and it's obvious that the corruption runs deep with who gets away with what. As we watch these LPs get away with things that other people would have been spending long times in prison for, and other things like that. There's an old boys club that runs this show. We knew about it when we started to get technology and people listening on other people's cell phones, and they found out pretty quickly that we were listening in and had to go through a bunch of hassle there, and they stopped that. Now they shred documents like crazy. Now they don't email each other, even in personal emails. It's all because it's corrupt. They're so worried about what Daryl Pleckus is doing in the BC legislature. He wanted people's computer hard drives to copy them, and they were all terrified of that. Well, why would they be terrified of that? Because there's corruption in it, and it runs
There's a lot of
deep, and
shit.
you can see that
A lot of shit going on. A lot of sick shit going on.
Yeah, there is for sure.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap this up. We've got the case coming up. You can send money to Jerry's lawyer. That'll always
Directly.
help.
Paul Lewin.
Paul Lewin.
It's in Toronto, Lewin Sagara. I don't know, I can get you that info for next show or something.
Sure, we're going to do a segment on what's going on with you and the whole medical, constitution or legality thing that's going on with medical cannabis moving forward every show. And I can come back every time you want. We're going to call it the Martin Medical Moment because you're kind of at the forefront of what's going on with this. There's another constitutional challenge that's coming up. We don't have a firm date for that one yet either. John Conroy is leading that one. And that's because he led or was one of the leaders on the team of lawyers that won that injunction against the MMAR that was going to deny people the right to grow for themselves.
Right.
And this time he's moving forward against the new regime that's happening, this Cannabis Act, or it's not the Cannabis Act, it's the MMPR, I should get that right. But the new thing they brought in to restrict people and how much they can get medicinally, how they get it, and blah, 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 blah. And his challenge is because there's no storefront access. And that is one of the things
Oh,
that
Johnny sticks on this side.
Taking away medical dispensaries is horrible. It's murder. And they need to really stop doing that and allow for them to be in whatever community wants to, and every community should want to have them. They really do save people's lives. And so that's the battle that's being fought. We're not sure of a court date on either yours or theirs. In the meantime, we'll keep you posted on what else comes up with it. We've got pop-up markets happening in some communities. We've got cannabis substitution projects. The Overdose Prevention Society has the High Hopes Foundation. In Nova Scotia, they're starting a cannabis substitution project there. They've already got one going on in Victoria. There's one in Nanaimo. And support these places, help these places. Talk to your governments, talk to your politicians. Defend medical cannabis. This cannabis so-called legalization, this fake legalization, is nothing about medical. And in fact, it's the actual opposite. It's really harming people's access to medical, and we need to fight that a lot. So thanks a lot, Jerry.
Yeah.
And we'll see you again next week, or at least we'll talk about your case if you can't make it in. But come back and see us soon, and thanks for hanging in there. I know it's tough.
I'm microdosing, man. I'm microdosing.
There you go.
Yeah.
We need drugs to get us through this. How can the government be so horrible that they're going to make life miserable to be, living in the first place because of all their taxes and regulations?
I got to take mushrooms just to deal with the shit.
And then they don't want drugs to deal with it. Because the drugs they sell you don't deal with it.
Yeah, little ass.
So very good. Thanks a lot, sir.
See you, buddy.
All right. So we're now going to move into our guest segment. We're going to have a guest every time in the show, and I am very privileged and honored to be able to have as my first guest on the THC show, Mr. Dana Larsen. Come on in, Dana. Have a seat in the hot seat. Dana is a real hero of mine since long before I was even an activist. I was reading cannabis culture magazines, and Dana was the editor of those magazines, and every week he had the job of explaining to people the horrible cannabis prohibition and what it all meant and who was being harmed and why it shouldn't be prohibited and all those things. And I learned so much during reading that. And Dana, honestly, I have told you this before, but I cried many times reading what you wrote there. You really touched me deeply. That was before I read The Emperor Wears No Clothes and quit my job to become an activist. That really, really, really touched me. That set me up for what happened there and how I've come to be where I am here. So you've done way too many things for me to start listing them. Maybe we can get into a few of them for sure. What are you doing right now? Like, what's your latest projects that has you going?
Well, I launched Microdose Mushroom Dispensary recently, and that's been keeping me busy. We've got a couple of hundred people registered now, and getting some pretty good responses from a lot of people about their use of microdoses.
Is that strictly online?
Yeah, it's strictly online. I've been saying I want to open a place in Vancouver to do it, and that got Councillor Melissa DeGenova quite upset and worried, and they've got a motion coming forward to City Council about unlicensed dispensaries and things. I'd like to get a permit for it, and certainly it's not violating any city bylaws. They have specific cannabis bylaws, but they don't have anything for microdoses. But we'll see. It's mail order. You're able to reach a lot more people as well. Obviously, the whole country. I get a lot of requests from the U.S. and overseas. I have to turn those people down.
How do they find you?
It's at mushroomdispensary.com. URL that I can't believe no one else had taken yet. It's medically focused, so we need some kind of documentation of your illness, from prescription bottles to a letter from your doctor to other kinds of medical documentation. But microdoses, I would say they're even safer than cannabis. I mean, cannabis is incredibly safe, but when you're dealing with a microdose of mushrooms, I mean, there's no risk at all, and unlike cannabis, which can sometimes be contaminated or something maybe, or that, it's incredibly safe and beneficial. There's no psychoactivity really as well at these kind of dose levels, and so even if if it even doesn't help everybody, it's not causing any harm to anybody. And we're getting a lot of really positive feedback from people about their use of these things. There's a lot of research showing the benefits.
Mushrooms is not cannabis. Mushrooms are beneficial. in many ways. Cannabis is beneficial in some ways. I would imagine that mushrooms.
Oh,
are not.
absolutely. Yeah, they're different.
How would you describe the medical value of mushrooms? How is it helping people? What is
It's
it
more
doing?
psychological, right? Although I've had some people with pain who have told me they've experienced dramatic pain relief after taking the mushroom. So there is a physical aspect to it as well, and you do feel it in your body after taking a macro dose or taking micro doses. The idea behind a micro dose is it's around 5 to 10% of a typical dose, right? So if you're looking to have a spiritual or recreational experience with mushrooms, you'd probably take 1 to 3 grams of dried mushrooms of the psilocybin.
And then it can even be psychedelic.
Yeah, at that level, yeah, that's like I said, that's a spiritual psychedelic kind of experience, right? At that level, depends on the variety of mushrooms and everything else. But we sell things in the range of 20 milligrams to 100 milligrams. So that'd be around 10% to 5% of a stronger dose. But that's enough. You get a little bit of an effect, but mainly it's a mood enhancement. People who've got things like PTSD, anxiety, depression, other mood disorders, really helps them a lot. And people facing end-of-life issues and things like that. And it's interesting, the way that SSRIs work is to sort of dampen down all your emotions so that the traumatic or the bad emotions get reduced, but still kind of do a lot of your positive ones, right? That's a generalization, but that's sort of generally how those things work. And the way mushrooms and other entheogens seems to work is they sort of raise up the other emotions so that the negative one isn't the one that you're always focused on. And people still feel those negative things, or they feel the sadness or the stress or that, but they also can feel the other positive things too. And so that one aspect doesn't overwhelm them or become the dominant force in their life anymore. And so it's quite interesting how I think they increase your sensitivity and allow you to accept and process negative things and move through them, perhaps, instead of just dampening everything down so it doesn't bother you because it's just made dull. And so, people have the option, and I'm not against people who want to use SSRIs if that's what you want. Great. But a lot of people contact me and say, I really want to get off these things. I don't like the way they make me feel. I want to try a different alternative. And so they're clearly not happy with how they're making them feel and how they're affecting them. And unlike a lot of antidepressants and that, the entheogens like mushrooms are non-addictive. You can't take it every day. The effect is drastically reduced and then eliminated. So you need a couple of days off in between. So I normally tell people to take it twice a week. There's a few different protocols and regimens. Some people take it a couple of days on, a couple of days off. But regardless, every regimen for these substances has to include a few days off in between to allow your body to reacclimate. So they're inherently non-addictive. And for a lot of people, they just do them for a few months and then they decide to stop. They've had what they want. Others might continue longer. But I think, to me, this is kind of the next phase. We still have a lot of work to do on cannabis law by any means. It's still not there yet, but we should also be expanding into other herbs and substances. And I think that psychedelics and mushrooms especially are a great place to start.
So they're non-addictive, but there's been a lot of success with people using mushroom experiences both in micro and macro dosing with respect to dealing with addictions.
Absolutely. And I think we need to make all drugs available, but if you're trying to reduce or eliminate your drug use, or if the root cause of your drug use is a psychological issue, if you're using opiates to deal with trauma or bad things that happen to you and you're trying to numb that kind of psychic pain, then I think that then the psychedelics can really help with that. And I think for everybody, really, whether or not you've got an addiction issue of some kind, they give you a chance to sort of reevaluate who you are, to see yourself from a new perspective, to gain insight about your own motivations and about your own psychology. And that can help people, and often helps them start making better decisions in their lives or to make changes that are necessary in their lives.
So it helps people with addictions. It helps people with depression and anxiety. It helps people with pain. All that's fair to say. So it sounds to me like access to mushrooms would be right in line with City Council's desire to have help with the opioid crisis. If cannabis is going to help people with the opioid crisis, it sounds like there's a really nice marriage there between those two. And as these dispensaries start happening to answer that and in response to that outside of the system, I think mushrooms might just be a product line that they should have available to people. Like you say, it's really about people having choice in what they're accessing.
Cities have been given a remarkable power, or have had their power acknowledged, I should say, by the courts, right? The Supreme Court of BC ruled that cities have the power to license and regulate cannabis dispensaries, and that they had this power before legalization was a thing.
Right.
This predictive zoning, where the idea they think the law is going to change in the future, so they can zone around that now.
Right.
And so that doesn't just apply to cannabis dispensaries. That means the
Right.
city has the power to license a heroin dispensary if they want to, or a mushroom dispensary, or any other kind of business that might break some federal laws but still be a benefit to the community or help things at a local level. It might give them more power to license sex workers in some ways too, or things like that, where they already kind of do that with some ways, but they don't really do it properly. So it
And
gives
cities
cities
are
lots of
typically
power.
more progressive than the federal government,
Well,
and they're more at a grassroots.
They also deal
point.
with the realities of what happens, right? So the federal government say, yeah, we're going to ban all drugs, and then a city has to deal with the fallout and the policing and the costs and the problems and the disease and the crime caused by these federal policies. So I think it's also why cities, and not all cities, because some cities are pretty harsh, but that cities, I think, have to deal with this stuff more, and so they're more focused on it. Whereas at the federal level, it's more of a grand vision or whatever. They don't really have to get into the nitty gritty.
Well, this whole cannabis thing seems to be a municipality by municipality kind of issue. I mean, every municipality is its
Absolutely.
own little bird about
Absolutely.
what's allowed and what's not allowed.
And-
And what you're saying is that these municipalities can decide that even the Cannabis Act is causing them problems or not meeting the needs that are there, and they can license things and allow for things or shut down things that they think doesn't fit with their community. And I think that's very, very powerful as we get Vancouver here to agree that cannabis can be dispensed in ways that are different from the Cannabis Act to address the opioid crisis. I think that's something that every municipality should pay attention to, and every activist in every municipality should pay attention to, because your municipality can help with the opioid crisis too by allowing cannabis to be dispensed and by allowing mushrooms to be dispensed. And that's something to really
And by
really
allowing
look
safe
forward to.
opiates to be dispensed
And
too,
safe
I
opioids,
mean,
which
I'm
brings me to
all
my next
for...
question for you, because you've recently also been involved in a campaign about looking at the provincial politicians and getting them to allow for a safe supply of all drugs to address this crisis. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, what we get, every level of government denies they have any power. In reality, every level of government has the power to make a huge difference. Right? Municipalities will say, oh, it's a federal, a provincial issue. Provinces will pass the buck to the feds, and the feds will often pass the buck to the UN or America or something else, say we can't do it because of some other thing. But the reality is provinces and municipalities have a huge amount of power. And, the chief health officer of British Columbia, Dr. Bonnie Henry, as well as pretty much every other health official or health group in the province, has said that BC needs to create a safe drug supply and stop arresting people. And we could do this through an amendment to the Police Act. And this is what, when I launched Sensible BC in 2013, we were collecting signatures to have legislation voted on that would decriminalize possession of cannabis in BC. And that exact same legislation, with just a slight tweak, which we've actually written and put together now, would decriminalize possession of all drugs. And really, when we talk about it, I'd rather think about it as decriminalizing people. Mm-hmm. We're decriminalizing drug users. Rather than decriminalizing a drug, we're decriminalizing people who use drugs. And I think that's a better way of sort of looking at that, right? We're not
who use certain
making
drugs.
them... Yeah, who use the banned drugs, or who use drugs that are still illegal at a federal level, right? People, it is, the words drugs is so confusing, and there's no war on drugs. We all use lots of, even people who consider themselves teetotalers use lots of drugs, right? So it's, but anyway, so I think a safe opiate supply in Vancouver to start with would be great, and there's a hypocrisy at City Hall because they vote unanimously for a safe drug supply to stop stigmatizing drug users. Same at the BC level, right? They say we got to stop stigmatizing drug users. They run ads and promote this idea drug users can be anybody. I agree with all that, but then at City Hall we get things. 420 is just the worst thing ever, and we have to stop it. And a mushroom dispensary, this is terrible. And cannabis dispensaries are really bad. At the provincial level, they pass laws that if no one can see your legal cannabis plant, if it's growing in a public space, you can be arrested. And this actually happened just today or yesterday, or just very recently anyways. And I want to just diverge for a minute about the story because this is in Revelstoke. And every year they have a art and garden festival where people who have a nice garden, local artists will come and put the art in their gardens, and then the community can tour through and look at the pretty plants and look at the local art. They have like a culture crawl thing in Vancouver, kind of similar but garden based, right? So this one couple who live in Revelstoke opened up their garden, and local artists put their stuff there. They said like 80 people came through or something from Revelstoke. And one of those people was not an undercover cop, an RCMP officer on his own time. and he saw 3 cannabis plants growing. They're allowed to grow 4 legally, so they're under their limit. But the plants were, because it was a public event, you could come and see the garden. Plants were in the garden. Well, under BC law passed by the BC NDP, if anybody can see your cannabis plant from a public space, that's a maximum 3-month jail sentence and a $5,000 fine. Penalties which double if you get caught a second time, 6 months and $10,000. And so these couple, they go a few days later, they go out for the day, they come home, their dog is outside, their place is a mess, there's a thing tacked on the door, and the RCMP say, we have a warrant. And they thought at first, oh, you hear about the cougar that's been around, and they're like, they wouldn't even tell them what they were there for. They just said, we have a warrant, searched their whole place, trashed everything, took their 3 cannabis plants, and they want to charge them with displaying these plants in a public place in violation of the Cannabis Control and Licensing Act of British Columbia. And she said, it's a small town. So the cops, if they really wanted, they could have just come to me privately and said, hey, those plants are growing in a spot they shouldn't be growing. We want you to move them or something. That would even be inappropriate, but that would be a better way of dealing with it, right? I mean, the cops should just leave them alone. But going in there and raiding them is like totally the other end. There's lots of middle ground if they really were concerned about these plants being seen in a public way or something, right? So, but in a way, this is, I mean, it's not good for these people, but it's a good chance for us to challenge it because it's so egregious, right? This couple was being part of their community. They weren't even visible from a public place. They were only visible because people were being invited into their home, and that's even questionable.
They probably didn't have a big sign that
whether
said
that's
these are
public.
marijuana plants with arrows pointing out.
I'd say it's even questionable if that's a public space. Like you're letting people into your home. They're your invited guests.
I hope everybody out there is mortified.
I want to go to Revelstoke and do something about this.
Our public stop. I'm not sure what to call them at this moment, but people are what? Cops are going to break into your house, trash your stuff, go into your drawers in your private bedroom because they think you might have some cannabis in there?
Legal plants.
What happened to Trudeau with get out of our bedrooms?
Legal plants.
What? We got cops in our bedrooms going through our underpants because they think there's some weed in there now because of the Cannabis Act? I hope everybody's fucking mortified about that.
So this is, and I lay this squarely at the BC NDP, you know. They put this in place. This is not a federal law. No other province has this law. 2 of them, Manitoba and Quebec, are worse, where they say you can't grow it at all, right? But BC, other than that, BC is the worst. No other province says you can't let your plants be seen in public. And from a government that wants to destigmatize drug users, but they're stigmatizing cannabis so much that someone even seeing it. And it's not about, I talked to Mike Farnworth. He gave me some time on the phone last year. We talked about some of these issues. He said, oh, it's not a big deal just to put a screen in front of your plant or something, right? And I said, that's not the point. And like, they say, oh, it's for security, but a plant on your balcony or that, you know, and a plant in a secure greenhouse can still be seen, even if it's all got a big cage around it or whatever. So it's not about security or anything. It's about
protecting us.
And you're allowed to, you know, I can spread money on my front lawn if I want to. No, I'm not against the law. Yeah. It's my own choice to not do something like that. If you think your plant's valuable, maybe you want to keep it safe, but that's up to you as a person to protect your own property or not, right? So this is really, but I want to go to Revelstoke and do something. I just happened today. I don't really know exactly, but, you know, I feel that we need to make a message out of this and also bring it home to Mike Farnworth. He's the minister who put this law in. It's not just him. They all work on it, but he's the guy in charge of this. And there's a lot of other really egregious stuff in this act as well that needs to be fixed too. You know, areas where, like, things that are penalized, that are not penalized, around alcohol.
$5 million if you open a dispensary.
There's a lot of punishments like that. Yeah, some of those are federal, but there's a lot of provincial. The dispensaries, they got to get when it comes to dispensaries, they need to get their own act together first. I want my dispensary to go out of business because the legal system is so good and cheap and plentiful and accessible and such high quality that I can't compete or I'm not needed anymore. And then I'll either join the legal system or I'll quit, but I don't care. At that point, we won.
Exactly.
But if they can't get their own act together, but they've acknowledged that people should be able to buy cannabis and access it, the grading places is the wrong focus, right?
Well,
all the
focus with a protection racket,
and that goes for LPs that lobby for us to be rated. It goes for every level of government. They should all be focused on the rules and fixing the rules so that they don't have to rate us because they've got better stuff, right? Exactly. They should have better higher quality, lower price materials. And the fact they can't is a big problem. But this thing in Revelstoke's really bad, and I want to try to organize a protest at my farmer's office. I was thinking maybe fall's coming up. Maybe we could all go there with our plants and have bring all your plants to his office and do a giveaway or a contest or some kind of fun thing with live plants there.
Sure.
And, I'm not sure exactly what to do in Revelstoke, but we should fly out there and do something or get some support for this, because it's a good example for us to use this as a case, right? It's
100%.
It's not somebody who was trying to. I thought about, well, I want to put them on my front lawn and call the cops and report myself for having plants in public, and then, but I like, and but this is
I like
a better.
the other idea better.
This is a better case though, because this is, and I'm not sure in Vancouver they probably would say we don't care and not even come, right? And that's the other thing, is that it depends on the city and the area, and the law shouldn't be like that. And I predicted when this was passed, this is going to happen. I said it's not going to be everywhere, but in some town you're going to get cops who are really against it, or you're going to get somebody who walks around on tiptoes and tries to see any plant in town and calls the police to report them, and it's definitely going to happen. And so we need to use this case to change. And I'm in the NDP. I'm a member of the party, a frustrated one sometimes, but by and large, I still support the NDP more than the other parties on cannabis and drugs and other issues, even though they don't do a great job. But they got a convention coming up in the fall, in November, and I'm trying to get some resolutions and policies to be debated there. We put one forward about drug policy, but I really want to, especially with this case, put something forward about amending the Cannabis Act, and that we need to, we should get this law out of there. It shouldn't be against the law for someone to see your plants. And there's a bunch of other things in there that should be amended. And even areas where maybe there should be some kind of penalty. The penalty is way out of whack to what it should be, right? So it's problem. There's a lot of problems in that legislation.
I want to go to that
very
convention.
stigmatizing.
I went to one on the lead up to John Horgan becoming premier here, and I talked to John. We talked about the medical cannabis issue and dispensaries and things, and he said, just wait till I'm premier. John, you said this to me. You said, just wait till I'm premier. We're going to take the lead on the cannabis issue, and we're going to do the right thing.
He said a lot of
That's
good
what he
stuff,
said
and I like John Horgan. I mean, I'm not like a big hater or whatever. I guess I just don't understand. I know that when you're premier, there's different pressures on you than when you're a guy making promises, right?
And lots to do.
But I don't get who is lobbying to say we don't want anybody to see your plants. I don't even get how that helps the LPs. Or I guess it makes it harder to grow at home or something. But some of the stuff I can see. Okay, I understand why they pushed for this, or that somebody else was pushing for this in some way. But some of this stuff, it just seems mean, and there's no real need for it.
That you made me think of earlier. There's a lot of corruption that's happening here. When they're saying we need more money for this and we're going to put more money into this, we don't really see that money. But that money does come down, and it does go out. And as I watch from the Cannabis Substitution Project, who it is that's lobbying these politicians and to get, and Van do as well, to get that money, it's pharmaceutical interests. They've got solutions to the opioid crisis. They've got that safe drug supply that they want people to have now. There's a lot of people who have sophisticated lobbyists that we don't see or know nothing about that get access to our politicians, and that's where these things go sideways. Is that if we could be party to those discussions that are had, we'd understand a lot more than we do. All we see is from the outside that they make these decisions, and we scratch our heads and go, well, gee, why would they do that? And that's not what they said they would do. And there's a process that happened between them saying that that's what they are going to do and them actually doing it. And that process is these people that have access to them, those dinners that they go to and those events that are catered and things. And they have favors that they've given to other people that got them into those positions of powers all through to the top of government, and we're dealing with that.
I would also say that we don't have a majority yet. I mean, I think we have a majority on cannabis stuff, but most people, if we had a vote about decriminalizing most drug users in British Columbia, it would lose. I mean, most people in BC do not. The comments that I see are let people die, drug users are scum, even from marijuana smokers, right? Marijuana, they should all just smoke weed, but heroin users, they deserve to die. They're stupid enough to put that in their bodies. It's Darwinism at work, survival of the fittest. I see that all the time, and maybe less from the weed community, but I see that in the weed community. I definitely see that in the mainstream. You look at the comments, we never read the comments or whatever, right? But some of the comments on news stories. So there's a lot of people who don't understand that, and I think that that's part of it too, is that they're catering to those votes, and they think that's a thing.
One of my shows, I'm going to do a rant about this. That's absolutely true. I'm going to say a little bit about it right now. That the people that are involved with the hard drugs, the people we see and identify as addicts to drugs, as the visible ones that are homeless or in poverty, all of those people have been scapegoated for decades here to justify this immoral and unjust drug war. And what Dana just referred to are all of the ways that those people have been stigmatized, and it's their fault, and they should make better choices, and all that kind of stuff. Trust me, you don't want to be in the shoes of anybody that's in that situation. They didn't ask to be there. They are the victims of their own life. And if they could have made better choices, they would. Nobody wants to be hiding behind a dumpster. They're driven there by criminalizing poor people and by criminalizing drug users. These are the abused children of our society. These are the people that didn't make it out of childhood most of the time without being molested in some way, usually by a family member. When you look into the history of the people that are getting the services provided on the downtown east side, I've been there for a long time, that is 90% of the people that are there. They come from all walks of life, but they're missing things out of their childhood. They had bad things happen to them. They've been traumatized in ways that they didn't have the tools to deal with. You're lucky if you had the tools to deal with the trauma that you went through. Some people do, some people don't. The people that don't should be treated with compassion. They should be given those skills. They should be given help by our society and recognized as just people that need something, not people that are making bad choices and deserve what they get and should be dead. So we need to recognize that as a society and stop stigmatizing and scapegoating these people and go there, but for the grace of God, go any one of us. We are all them. We are all addicted to all kinds of things. We are all doing the best that we can, and some of us are better at doing that than others, and some of us have better resources than others, and we should just love all of our brothers and sisters and not like their behavior in many cases, but help them with who they are and what they got going through and love them as human beings and be lucky that we didn't have to go through what they do and know that we have no idea what a person goes through. We have no way of knowing that symphony of emotions and complex thought processes that are happening inside of them, much of it genetics, some of it environment, none of it much their choice. So anyway, let's solve that as best we can too as we look for truth, hope, and change, and we'll try to address that more succinctly in upcoming shows as well. Thank you for bringing that up, Dana, as well. I really
for sure.
it.
And sometimes opium users and that, we saw this in Canada and other countries too, but in the 2000s, a lot of people were, especially in the Southeast Asian community, were drinking Dota tea, which is kind of an opium-based tea. A lot of it was grown in Canada and Delta and other areas, or they'd bring it in relatively small amounts. And there was a big crackdown on this from the RCMP. They raided the opium fields growing in Canada. They busted a lot of people. And if you look at the news, about 5 or 6 years later, there's stories about a lot of heroin use skyrocketing in the Southeast Asian community. And they talked to this guy. He's like, I used to drink Dota tea. He's a truck driver. He's got a physically demanding job. He would drink Dota tea to relax and ease his pain. Maybe he was hooked on the tea, but it's certainly like people are hooked on coffee or whatever, right? It's not really that bad to be drinking Dota tea every night, drinking some mild opium tea, yeah. And then he couldn't get it anymore, so he started using heroin instead to deal with his pain. And then now he's lost his job, he's lost a lot of money, his family's screwed up, he's worried he's going to die from a fentanyl overdose. And this is for what? Like, if he, maybe he'd be better if he wasn't drinking Dota tea all the time. I don't know, but he was fine. He had a job, he had a family, and the real risk of that tea is maybe there's some long-term, not great for your liver, or if you drink it every day for 50 years or whatever. But so what? That's nothing.
They did the same thing in alcohol prohibition. They drove beer to whiskey.
And this guy, so we think of people. I mean, this guy, I guess, made the choice to not quit or something, but prohibition made him have to make some bad choices. And if we just let him have his tea, he would have been fine. His family would have been fine. And for a lot of people, I mean, some people need heroin and need stronger versions, but a lot of people just need some opium tea, and they'd be able to stop using other stuff and only use a milder form to get the pain relief and the effects they need. And I launched a campaign.
And legal opium users, and there's lots of them that are using opioids for all kinds of different stuff. It's widely prescribed across Canada. They're just prohibition away from being illegal heroin users.
Part of the problem is that we only make really, really strong opioids available. You can't really get mild stuff, right? It's only OxyContin or fentanyl or heroin. And so when they're talking about a safe drug supply, they're like, we should give them Suboxone and this and that. And I'm all for those options, but why is nobody saying we should also? Well, we need all the options, I think, right?
Sure.
But that shouldn't be the first one.
I'm not all for it, but it should be an option.
Yeah, I think there should be lots of options. But I think, to me, offering Suboxone and not not offering a cup of opium tea first, and a cannabis edible, and some kratom, and a whole bunch of other things before you get to the Suboxone, that to me makes way more sense, right?
Way more sense.
There should be lots of options, and the safer ones should be first. And the vast majority of people who are now using stronger forms of these drugs, who are using heroin or fentanyl, would prefer to use milder forms, and would prefer to use cannabis or kratom or opium tea or smoking opium or whatever. But
And if they
having
have
that option.
all the right information, I mean, that's what regulations should be around. Is what are you telling people about these things? If they understand, here's some milder opium, but there's some addictive possibilities because of the way it interacts with your body. Here's some cannabis edibles. You know, it doesn't have that, but you can eat too much, and that's not fun. And just tell people the truth about things. We're adults, for God's sakes. I mean, we don't want to hurt ourselves.
Yeah.
We're trying to trek our journey through life in ways that are best for us as individuals, and it's nobody's business but us what we decide to try for that. There's all kinds of salesmen out there trying to sell you all kinds of different things to add to your journey, and it's up to you to decide which of those you want and don't want. It's not up to governments to be saying, well, you can have these options and you can't have these options, because they can never be trusted. They've proven themselves that now because of what they did with cannabis prohibition. They can never be trusted. People know they can never be trusted. Government doesn't have the right motives to decide what's best for you. They've got way too many people trying to influence for what's best for you that are in their interests and not yours. So we can't trust them, and we need to all know that, and then we can move forward. And if governments are limited and accountable in what they do, then they have a place here for us. But the place that they're occupying now, every day more and more legislation being added to the already reams of legislation that each and every government makes every time they come in, and don't undo the last guys, and it's just getting so stupid, the powers that these states have that we live in. These are supposed to be public servants. We're supposed to have real serious rights, and they're supposed to have not much at all. They shouldn't even talk to us or bother us unless there's a good reason for it. A, they're going to protect us from something that's real, that they have information about that they should give us because they're the public body that should tell us what the truth is about things. Or B, they actually think that we have done something to harm somebody else in a significant way, and there's enough evidence there that they can actually say, excuse me, can I talk to you, and find that out. Other than that, they should get the hell out of our lives. They've never served to do much good when they get in there with the role of telling us what's right and wrong for us, and we've proven that with cannabis prohibition. This will shortly be, as they sort it all out and things get really clear for the general public, it'll be clear before too much longer that the whole prohibition of cannabis was nothing but a farce to do with anything to do with harms from cannabis. All of it was reefer madness lies made up to protect the interests of people that just didn't want to have cannabis in the environment to compete with their pharmaceutical drugs or their fuel or whatever it is they were trying to sell us. Cannabis was the big competitor that got, happily put down by all of these different groups. And they've lied to us, and when the truth is really known, then history's going to look back on this stuff and go, wow, the plant that could have done the most for the human being species and for society is the one that we spent so much time and effort demonizing in horrible ways and spending money and everything else on and hurting people to try to keep it out of the realm just because it competes too well with other things. It's been a horrible ride. We're still not at the end of it yet and can't really see yet how it's all going to look from the distance, but future generations are going to look back on this. They're going to thank us for keeping on the fight. And it's going to be like, how horrible was that this plant that's now in everything, I mean, in the future it's going to be
It won't just be cannabis too, because
everything.
A lot of people will use microdoses and psychedelics in the future. When it's legalized, that'll be a common experience. And I think that microdoses and macrodoses and that could replace a lot of our pharmaceuticals, could help people's mental health, help us as a society and as a planet tap into some of that global consciousness. And so, when you're drunk all the time, it's easy to be hurt people. And because it numbs your senses and dulls your compassion often, and we live in a society where alcohol is heavily glorified and promoted at all levels. And right. I'm not banning alcohol or anything like that, but we definitely need more alternatives. And people turn away from alcohol and use other substances and plant medicines. Often it's good for their physical and for their mental health. And and so I would love to see more of that happening and more,
and you are.
And in a world. And so I think we're making that change happen, and,
Yeah, we are.
it's a long battle. You know, we thought, or you sort of dream, oh, one day they're going to legalize cannabis. I used to give my speeches, oh, they're going to legalize and they'll open the prisons and people will be
Yeah.
let out, and how great it will be. And well, we're not there yet, right? I
Not
mean,
yet.
they've legalized it, but they didn't open up the prisons, and people that are slowly giving out these sort of half-ass pardons and stuff, and
Yeah.
but there's a long way to go, and people are still being arrested and charged for having 3 plants growing in their garden during an art and garden festival, or just possession. We haven't even decriminalized simple possession of cannabis unless it's the certain kind of cannabis that comes from a certain store and stuff. So there's still so much more.
Dana, on
to
behalf
do.
of so many people that I know and so many people I don't know, but I know that they share this sentiment. I can't thank you enough for all the efforts that you've done. You obviously dedicated your life to this. I don't know, before university, we'll get into that one day another time with you.
Yeah.
But you know, you've done so much. You're such a good spokesman for us. I can't thank you enough. I don't know how many more times to say it, but I just can't thank you enough.
It's been fun, honestly. Like,
that's
I mean,
good.
I mean, I've made some sacrifices in my life, certainly, and had some things, but overall, I really, you know, I think it's been pretty fun, really. Like, it's something that there's risks in that. I've kind of managed to avoid any serious jail time or things. You know, Jerry Martin, probably
Yeah.
less fun for
Jerry's
him once he
having less
faced
fun.
jail time. Although it's still, like, I think we do it for a reason, and we do it because we do enjoy what we're doing. I mean, I feel good about being able to help people. I feel good about spreading this message. There's some things that I'm not so good at, but there's some things that I am good at. And being a spokesperson and talking about things is something that I'm pretty good at. So I like being able to use that skill to kind of be a spokesperson for our movement. And it's a responsibility. I don't want to say the wrong thing or make us look bad or whatever, right? You know, so you try
Well, I appreciate your
try to sort of
humility,
be
but
careful about
your
that,
life
but-
has also been at risk the whole time. You know, you went and told government a long time ago, no, not that long ago, but a while ago, that you've probably sold more marijuana than anybody else in the room, and there was some pretty impressive people in that room. And
Yeah.
you might not be lying. You've really helped people get access through your dispensaries and other ways. And your life has been at risk through all of it. It still is at any time. You know,
We got big
we all
pl-
hope
I-
that doesn't happen. We all hope the day doesn't come like it did for Jerry, where the cops say, "Come on over here. We're going to put handcuffs on you, and now we're going to, you know, run you through hell for a while."
Yeah,
So
that
you
might-
live with that, whether you think so or not. I'm glad that you're able to ignore it,
Well,
and I appreciate your humility in that. And I agree with you too. Let's have fun. That's been my theme. I'm going to end the show with that. I always do, because let's have as much fun as we can, solving whatever it is we got to solve in our lives. That's kind of the point of life. Life is full of ups and downs and things that aren't easy to deal with. Let's have as much fun as we can. So I really appreciate the attitude that you've just told us about there. It's probably one of the keys to you keeping on doing what you're doing. And we need a lot of people to keep on what they're doing and do more things than they're already doing.
do. It's a
because,
mass
like you say, we're
movement.
not done yet.
Yeah, it's a mass movement, and so it's something that we need people, and it's something that I've helped to inspire other people. People come to me and say, "Oh,
Yeah.
I opened a dispensary because you," or this and that.
Yeah.
That's the most meaningful, right?
There
When
you
other
go.
people, when you can pay it forward and you can make it, because it's not something about any one person doing it all themselves.
That's
or
for
whatever,
sure.
right? And
I really appreciate
Yeah.
that. So thank you so much for coming on my show and being my my first guest, sorta, because Jerry was our first guest, but he's a regular here. We're gonna slot that you're in is going to be occupied by you know, many different people over the next number of weeks, but it's one at a time pretty much. And I really appreciate you being the first guy to come and tell us all about things. And I can't wait to hear what you're going to tell us about next time you come. Thank you, Mr.
thanks for having me, Neil. My pleasure.
All right. Yeah, we're going to do better preparation in future weeks to have more videos so that I can be less on it. At this point, we're going to talk about the CSP. We're going to move the microphone. Yes, we are. I borrowed these. They were just hanging around the studio because there was the dab culture event here last week, and I guess they were for that. So I thought, well, hey, that's a good way to start the show, but it's not something we pre-planned ahead of time. Didn't have bells or whistles. We're going to get better as we go for sure. This segment is going to be about the CSP, and that's the Cannabis Substitution Project. It's of course very dear to my heart because I started it, and it's grown to obviously have a life of its own as these projects do. I don't know, 2.5 years ago when I started this, if I knew it was going to be here now, but I thought it would certainly be a very important entity and solving people's needs for access that face a barrier of poverty. I hoped originally that it would pretty quickly result in dispensaries having high-dose edibles, because starting the Cannabis Substitution Project was a response by myself to the City of Vancouver banning edibles from dispensaries as part of their plan to regulate out of business the 150 or so dispensaries that were operating without licenses in Vancouver at the time, about 3 years ago. Not allowing them to sell edibles was a horrible thing in my opinion. Each of those dispensaries had average 1,500 clientele, give and take, and varying by how long they've been open, but there were some with 6,000 members, and these people were accustomed to being able to have access to the medicine that really helped them. And in so many cases, that was high-dose cannabis edibles. It's horrible for me to think about all those people, and I met many of them that were coming to me and appealing about what they could do. Where can we get these? And there was still mail order available, but that's not available to everybody by any means. Still pricey for people that couldn't afford them. Thankfully, there were still some dispensaries that remained, that were continuing, even in the face of these regulations, to have those available to people, but so many of them didn't. And not just that, so many of those dispensaries just closed up and went away eventually after trying to stay open as long as they could, with threats from the city, threats from their landlords, revenue streams taken away, living in fear and risk of all of your life's savings and belongings and your personal liberty was too much, and too much for a lot of people to put their employees on the line for that as well. And so we lost a lot of those dispensaries, and we lost a lot of access to the high-dose cannabis edibles. Right around that same time, we have a never-seen-before overdose death crisis resulting from tainted street drugs with carfentanil and fentanyl. Who knows who's responsible for that, killing people? The dealers didn't want their clients to die. Who knows who wants people to die? I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm somewhat of a coincidence theorist sometimes, because what's the coincidence on that? Who's gaining from all of this? There's lots of people. In any case, overdose crisis, people dying. I learned when I opened the Vancouver School of Drug War History, the Herb School that we called it back in 2004 at Main and Hastings. I operated that for almost 2 years before I went on the first Freedom Tour. And although we felt that like our clientele would be people from the cannabis and pot community venturing into the downtown east side at Main and Hastings there, the reality was most of our clientele came from the area. And we got to know a lot of people from the area that were involved with the use of street drugs and opioids and other hard drugs, that were having issues with trying to withdraw off those drugs, with issues with how those drugs were affecting them negatively, being of impure quality and other things. And one of the things we learned there is that high-dose cannabis edibles is something that could work for a lot of people that were in that situation. And so now, we zoom ahead until 3 years ago. That was started in 2004 back at the Herb School. 3 years ago, when the city decided to ban edibles from dispensaries and the overdose crisis was killing people, it was obvious to me we needed to get high-dose edibles back into the communities to save people's lives. And as for those people that couldn't afford them in dispensaries, we needed to give them out there. And I felt like if we gave them out from there and we did it well enough and long enough, that the city would be forced to recognize that we were saving people's lives and allow that to happen. What I didn't think is it was going to take 2.5 years for that to happen. So for 2.5 years, we ran the Cannabis Substitution Project, where we go to the Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users office building close to Main and Hastings and set up a table and package up donations that were given by people that are compassionate and caring. And we hand them out in the form of care packs. There's usually 4 to 6 edibles, a couple of joints. Sometimes we have topicals, sometimes we have sandwiches, sometimes we have other things that are donated to us. And we give it all out to the community that lines up for it. Some people get there 3 or 4 hours before we arrive to do that. Sometimes even in the hot sun, and sometimes even in the cold weather, because it's been 2.5 years of doing that now. We've been through summers and winters. And we've got an amazing group of people that have been with us, many of them since early on. Thanks, Jerry Martin, just leaving the studio there. I really appreciated that. If you missed that segment with Jerry Martin, you'll be able to go back and watch the show on cannabis culture.
Pot.tv.
Pot.tv. Currently banned on YouTube. All right. So, yeah. So we've been giving out high-dose edibles. Over that course of time, we're over 150,000 high-dose edibles that we've given out in the 30 months that we've been there. We have somewhere as well over 100 and maybe around 200 regular people that come every single time. We go there twice a week. We're there Thursdays and Sundays at noon. And we just give people hopefully what they need to get through to the next time that we're there, and not have to use the other drugs. The anecdotal reports that we're getting, we've been collecting a lot of these stories from people, is amazing. Of course, you know, the spirit of the project was to offset the use of opioids and other drugs. But the reality is that cannabis works for a lot of things, and it helps people sleep, and it helps them with their arthritis, and it helps them with the other physical pain that they have. It helps them with their emotional well-being and their overall health. And so we've got a lot of enthusiastic people that are very appreciative of us being there, and they like to tell us as best they can as they come to the desk to get their care bag. They get a moment to say, hey, you know, this is so helpful to me, or it's so helpful in this way and in that way. And it's a beautiful thing that's going on there. The project is run completely by volunteers, including myself. We have 15 people basically that just come there every single time and make things happen. We have the Holy Rollers. There's a half a dozen people at a table rolling joints for the time that we're there. There's the girls that package the joints, Sarah and Jen, and sometimes an alternative, and sometimes Michael. Although Michael's had a little holiday. I hope you're doing great, Michael. Love you. And Michael, the Cookie Monster, helps us with cookies. And these people make it all happen. We've got our people at the door. We've got our people managing lines. Andrew looks after all of the volunteers, and he's just great. And it's a wonderful community that's developed in 2.5 years there. The lineup outside have come together to know each other, and friendships have been made. In the very early days, we had issues with what I called line management. We used to hand out joints to try to keep people calm and stop butting in, and that's all changed now, and everybody is just sort of happy. There's a real spirit that's there that's very positive. It's kind of like being at a pot rally twice a week for myself, where you're just with a whole bunch of your community having a good time. And we do have a good time. And so that's what we've been doing there. And I've alluded a couple times to what it took 2.5 years to get. And what that is that City Council, after originally the former council and mayor of Vancouver decided that area that we're in, where those poor people are in, that it was the poorest postal code. I don't think it is anymore quite, but almost. In Canada there, the Hastings corridor, Main and Hastings downtown area, was an exclusion zone for cannabis dispensing. And that was because the local health unit, Coastal Health, one of their representatives, a Dr. Daly, on a little bit of a personal agenda, had highly recommended against cannabis being allowed in that area, said that was a vulnerable population of people that could suffer psychosis, and many of them got anxiety from cannabis, and that we shouldn't be doing that. So that now has been reversed, even though she still maintains that same line. Shame on her. Council has now voted on a motion and accepted a motion to allow cannabis dispensing in that area, but not through the Cannabis Act's government legal stores, dispensed in a way that specifically addresses the opioid crisis, and that's with high-dose edibles and affordable cannabis flowers and concentrates. So we're really thrilled that that's finally happened, and we're going to see how that shakes out down the road. They're supposed to have consultations with us and others about how to do that best. In the meantime, we're going to do it anyway, because that's what we've been doing, and of course we wouldn't stop, because we're helping people and we're saving people's lives. And other groups are now contemplating going into that area and setting up and offering those services to people, cannabis edibles for sale, hopefully on sliding scales, hopefully compassionate prices, and they will be, because these will be good people that are wanting to address that issue that we have there, which is poor people dying of opioid overdose. But it's not just a downtown east side problem, and that's the thing. There needs to be access to high-dose cannabis edibles everywhere, because the overdose crisis hits everywhere. There's no community that's been spared, rich or poor, everything in between, all throughout our province and across Canada and down through the States and around the world. There's people dying because of a tainted drug supply and using drugs that are risky. So we need to have high-dose cannabis edibles available for people. And that's the goal. That's the goal of this show. That's the goal of our project. And and we're hoping that we can get that happening. And with the help of our council here, and maybe with the help of your council there, you can make that a reality and give people an option that will save their life and change their life in very positive ways. There are many people that I know, I don't know how many tens of thousands there are, but I know hundreds of people that tell me that cannabis saved their life, that they were in the position of where people are now struggling with these things, and that cannabis helped get them out of there and save their life. So we're going to watch that as it happens. We're going to help try and make that happen. So that's our segment on the Cannabis Substitution Project, although we do have video, do we, for the CSP?
No, did not get any.
Well, you know, you're in luck, because down the road there'll be much more video, much less me, although we got lots to tell you. There's some other things coming up.
Change in your area.
Well, and to affect change in your area, you can take part in these events that happen. There's a lot of events that happen in the cannabis community across Canada. We'll try to keep you up to date on some of those. There's a lot of them, but there's some that are kind of dear to our heart that we'd like to promote. The CannaFest is coming up in Grand Forks.
Where should they send you something if they have an event in their area?
Oh, Neil Magnuson is not hard to find, and cannabis culture is not hard to find, and you know, and if you want us to talk about your event, you can send it to us, and we might. Probably, if you're good people putting on a good event, trying to move the movement forward, and it's not about patience, it's not about greed, it's about patience, then we would love to help you with that.
Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
It's all good.
Sure
I'm gonna have you dropping in a lot more. Neil's gonna get himself a camera. Neil over there. I'm Neil. He's Neil. Different spelling, different people, but you know, of one heart.
Different people. Have to clarify that.
Neil and Neil. But you know, I need to have a co-host sometimes to keep me on the straight and narrow, and to give me a chance to rest my lips. And so I'm very happy that Neil has agreed that he'll be allowed to be on camera. He's already got a mic, and welcome to jump in anytime. CannaFest quite likely could be the best classic rock festival in North America. The lineup is impressive. There's Brett Michaels and Cheap Trick and Vince Neil and too many more to list. I love CannaFest because I love the people that put that on. The BC Pain Society, they currently have a dispensary that's on Commercial Drive at 10th or 11th, I believe, right? No, probably 13th or 14th, right up there by where the Vancouver Compassion Society has been for so many years. But they're in danger. They need your help. There's a petition that's going around that they'd love to have you sign and put a few comments there as to why this is wrong, that they're not being allowed to continue the way that they were. And I've really valued that place for a long time. They've been one of the leaders in moving this cause forward. And I love what Dana said about, sure, we sacrifice and we work hard and there's risk, but it's fun. And that's kind of that's kept me going for all these years. Is I believe that the purpose of life is to learn how to have fun. We live in a yin and yang universe where things are up and down, and there's a lot of horrible things. And if you want to focus on all of them all the time, then you can be just as miserable as you can be for all that time that you focus on them. But there's a lot of really nice things going on, and really wonderful, fantastic, powerful things in this amazing universe of ours going on as well. And if you choose to focus on things that give you a thrill and make you feel good, well, you can feel good all the time too. I think that the truth is that maybe the best way to live is somewhere in the middle, but I can't really say. I don't think that misery is a good way to live, but you know, I haven't really chosen that forever, and I just don't think so. And bliss, well, bliss is probably good maybe forever, but I don't know, not for me. I like some reality, and if you really follow and try to find out what truth is, and
can't reality be bliss?
Can reality be bliss? Probably not.
Wouldn't it be?
Well, no. If you really pay attention to what's going on, you're not going to be just having bliss all the time, you know. But there's a lot going on. There's billions and trillions of things going on all the time, and you can only focus on some of them. And but the truth isn't pretty in many cases. I'm a truth seeker. I try to find the truth. I don't know why, but I try to find the truth. People ask me things, so I want to be able to tell them the truth. I don't want to not know, and that's the answer to most questions is I don't know. The answer to most other questions, well, it depends, it seems. But I do try to be a truth teller and a truth seeker, and in that I have to face the ugly truth sometimes, and my life is not total bliss. But I don't let it be total ugliness either and total misery. As I mentioned before, I'm driven by real anger about what's going on in this fucked up society of ours. We lived in a fucked up world. We're trying to unfuck the world. That's what this show's about. And so I'm driven to do that. It's there. If I want to visit it, I'll get angry and I'll cry and I'll be mad. But I don't visit it often. I try to stay focused, at least in my conscious being, about the things that are positive, the moves that we're making forward, the hope that we have. And hope is such an important message, an important thing to understand that is there. There is hope. There's hope in lots of different ways, and it's very important to find hope. If you're defeated and think that there is no hope, then you're not going to do anything to change it. And that's the right thing to do sometimes too. There's only two types of things in life. There's those things you can change, and there's those things you can't change. And of the things you can change, there's only two types of those that are worth the effort and those that aren't. And each of us must decide for ourselves what we think are the things that are worth our efforts to change, if you want to change anything. But change is part of life and part of growth and change. If you're not trying to do any of that, then, well, maybe you're old and retired, and that's your right. But if you're still young and you got something left, well, that's what life is. Life is an adventure of finding the truth and working for change, because we're not there yet in lots of different aspects and lots of different parts of life. And even for your own life, just make it better by making the world around you better. And going to these coming events is something that we can do to take part in that. And when the coming events is what quite likely could be one of the best classic rock and roll festivals on North American soil, well, there's a way to promote the movement and network and meet people and learn to speak your truth and learn where your position is and what's right for you. As we all find our place in this journey of ours, we are all crew. And we all have some job to do, and what yours is depends on what you think is wrong and what you think you can make right and what you're driven to try to make better. And I want to give you some hope that if you want to make things better and there's things that you're not happy with and you'd like to see changed, well, you can make a change. There is ways to do that, and there are ways to feel like you're making a change. And every little thing helps, and you never know what does what. You could help one person and give them the education and the truth that's going to help them, but they may pass that along, and you never know who gets that truth in the end and where your ripples go out into the world. And it's fun doing things to try to make a difference. It's fun throwing wrenches in the evil corporations' gears as they try to monopolize and exploit us and this world. It can be fun to do it in ways, and find the way that's right for you is what I'd like to say to that. So the CannaFest is coming up August 8th and 10th in Grand Forks. I'm sure you can find that online, and tickets may still be available for that. It's a really nice trip to Grand Forks coming up right away. It should be nice up there. I hope they have a great time. A little later in the month, August 25th, we have the 420 Golf Tournament. I'm not sure, the 5th annual, I believe, coming up, and it is a wonderful event. If you like golf, if you like being out in nature, if you like being with people that consume cannabis and have fun doing that, and if you like consuming cannabis, then that's the place for you, for any and all of those reasons. The 420 Golf Tournament happens in Squamish, BC. It's, like I say, August 25th, put on, I believe, by the Cannabis Growers of Canada. Big supporters in past years of the Cannabis Substitution Project, and I understand that they're going to be supporting substitution as well this year, as that's a very important cause, and they've been behind that all the way. And so much fun. If you like to golf, man, oh man, they got the dab carts running around, and the whole golf cart is given over to the event. And yeah, that's a really great way to have fun changing the world as you meet with other great activists and people that are doing good things, and find ways to satisfy your medical needs by meeting people that have that available. And they'll have booths and people there representing their products as well. So that's awesome. The next one on my list is the Karma Cup in Toronto. Sarah Sunday and her crew put that on every year. It is one of the most spectacular cannabis cups. I don't know if you know what a cannabis cup is if you're not in the cannabis community. I hope we have lots of viewers that are also not in the cannabis community, checking out what's going on with truth, hope, and change in our world. But these cups are amazing places for people to understand which of the cutting-edge medicines that are being produced are right for them and that work for people. Great place for people to display their products and wares, and just a good time is had by all. So the Karma Cup is coming up on September 7th and 8th in Toronto. You've got to get a hold of them way before that, because they're going to send you out this huge, amazing kit of cannabinoids for you to test and help other people learn which are the best ones, and what works for you might work for them. And it's a lot of fun testing cannabis products, that's for sure. I think they give you about a week to do that. They send it out to you, and then you all meet together and have a whole bunch of entertainment and education and things going on. and you talk about what worked best and who's doing the right things the right way these days. So that's what's going on in coming events. Also coming up on the Pot TV network, Pot TV. Neil, where do they find us?
Pot.tv.
Pot.tv. I'll leave that up. You got to do something. I'll leave that up to you. Pot.tv. Lots of shows on Pot TV. Lots of shows in the archives. Other things. We've got, where should we start? On Monday, Carly Marley with the 420 Lifestyle Show and BC Bud Gal. They put on such an entertaining show. I think they've got lots of viewers. I don't know how many, but it's hundreds and thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands. And, there's millions of people that are followers of the cannabis culture experience here. And a lot of them tune into her show, and she entertains and educates like nobody else. Carly Marley is a force in this world, and they cover all kinds of issues to do with women in cannabis and Indigenous people in cannabis and all things cannabis
All
and
things
just
cannabis culture.
all things
It's
cannabis
real
culture. It's just that's the
is-
go-to place for
You
really
can-
what's going on.
I would put that up in court. 19 years broadcasting easily, everything I've been involved with, the 420 Lifestyle Show, would easily show there is no harm to cannabis and the cannabis culture, and there is an incredible wealth of culture.
Good times.
Of culture, just
Yeah.
so much. I can't tell you how many
Oh, I know.
musicians, artists, it's
It's an amazing world that we live in,
That's like
and
Monday.
her show
That's only Monday.
does a great job of giving you a nice slice of that, and that's Mondays on the Pot TV network. They start at 4 o'clock as well, do they?
yeah, right around 4.
Right around 4 o'clock. That's cool. Tuesdays we've got THC with Neil. That's me, and we're gonna try to educate, stimulate, and motivate, and tell you about all what's going on in the cannabis world and in the world in general. Our show's a lot about what governments are supposed to be doing here and what they're not doing here and what they're doing that they shouldn't be doing. So I really look forward to having you watch every Tuesday, and we'll do our best. I'm not great at this. I'll get better, I hope. We'll look back on this first show one day and have a chuckle for sure. But I got to thank Neil a huge amount for helping me and making it all work. And there's people behind the scenes, and we'll get you to know some of those as we move forward. On Wednesday, we have From Under the Influence with marijuana man Greg Williams. Greg is the elder in this community. He was at it a long time before I got going in it. We might be similar age, but he's been marijuana man for so long now. And he really wears that badge with responsibility. Greg has traveled the world. He has smoked and consumed every type of cannabis strain from every place. And I mean, a man with more experience, I'm not sure exists, as he's been nonstop.
Look at someone who's just loved the plant and should not be bothered in any way. What a nice marijuana man. What is
Very
the
nice
problem?
marijuana man. Yeah, and he has a great show. He has a few different guests. Al the Alchemist visits him most of the time, I would imagine, and he's got a bunch of other good people that come and join him there.
Rose,
Mr.
Vic,
Cook.
it's always
Yeah.
always someone from under the influence. That is a guarantee.
That's
It'll
a
be
guarantee.
fun. There will be something else for you to watch on Thursday. There's always other things throughout the day. And then Friday.
Friday we've got Jeremiah's show, Cannabis News Live, and Cannabis Culture News Live, exactly. And Jeremiah's show is the be-all and end-all of all cannabis culture pot TV shows, as he covers everything from current news and what's going on. And he's on location live lots of times. And he's the guy behind the 420 rally and Cannabis Day and so much else that he's just got his finger on the pulse of everything. So he actually even does a show most of the time. So that's Fridays. And he has many guests during the course of his show as he touches base with what's going on.
So much covered news, like realistic news. This to me is realistic news. No one's
So if you want to know what's going on,
faking news.
watch Jeremiah's show.
Like
Follow all the other pot TV shows.
Saturday, high noon.
Oh, right. I thought, I got to the end of the week and I forgot the weekend because Boss Lissa, with her revolving group of co-hosts, has been putting on a show for, must be over a year now, a year and a half maybe, something like that, a long time. And Boss Lissa runs the High Score Lounge over here, where you can come to Cannabis Culture on Hastings Street, 300 block of West Hastings Street, and play whatever video game from your past that you want, and whatever video game from the present exists, and maybe you even got some that they can let you see from the future. It's a very strange place, man, because there's magical vapors involved at High Score. So yeah, come and see High Score at the Cannabis Culture complex here. We got the store downstairs, we got High Score on the second floor, the lounge upstairs, Pod TV Studios right here. We're the hub of cannabis activism in this neighborhood anyway, and our tentacles go out a long way as we try to change this, not just for us here in Vancouver, which we made a real bubble zone for quite a while, not just now every little community out in Canada, which is on their own trying to fight with the federal and provincial and their own municipal governments, but the whole world should really stop hurting people for using cannabis and start encouraging it as a plant that can save their economy and help their people, and all the good things that are truthful about cannabis, and we can maybe shake the reefer madness lies of forever. I can't thank enough all the people that helped me do this. I thank you, the viewer, for watching. It's really been great to have you along. I hope that we're able to make a difference in your life, and maybe make a difference in the world somewhere. And I want you all to have as much fun as you can changing the world. From myself, Neil Magnuson, Pot TV, and the THC Show, have as much fun as you can changing the world.